Modi. I will not take a lot of time, and I will please invite Mr. Mohit Gupta from the Friends of Book who have honored us with their presence today and helped us launch this book.
थैंक यू सानिया जी। नमस्कार आप सबको, मैं आपका अभिनंदन करता हूँ। दिल्ली में बारिश होने के बावजूद भी आप लोग समय पे आ पाए और हम इस कार्यक्रम को समय पे शुरू कर पा रहे हैं, ये खुद में एक बड़ी कमाल की बात है। बारिश से बड़ी कोई पावर नहीं और ट्रैफिक जैम से ज़्यादा कोई परेशान करने वाली कोई बात नहीं हो सकती। बट व्हाट वी नीड, पावर विद इन, इफ स्पीकिंग अबाउट द बुक एंड वेलकम यू ऑल, पावर विद इन द लीडरशिप लेगेसी ऑफ नरेंद्र मोदी is something which is not only to lead our own lives, but to help others lead their lives when they are in crisis. In my view, all life values can be learned from the acts of leadership of others, and that's how all the epics have been created in the past, in historic past. And the journey of our beloved Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi has been captured by Shri R. Balasubramaniam ji in this book in a very unique way, which is a great amalgamation and a combination of the Indic wisdom in a very beautiful format. Each and every page of the book will take you into a different journey, will inspire you very much. We as Friends of Books are committed to this book, and we would love to take this not only in many cities of India, but outside as well, wherever we have our reading forums. I congratulate R. Balaji for the book, and I welcome you all for this very august panel discussion that we will have in a while. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohit ji. Every event must start with the blessings, so we would like to do the lighting of lamp, and I'll request Dr. Balu, Mr. Adil, Mr. Piramal, and our panelists to kindly be here and light the lamp for us.
या कुन्देन्दु तुषारहार धवला या शुभ्रवस्त्रावृता या वीणावरदण्डमण्डितकरा या श्वेतपद्मासना या ब्रह्माच्युतशङ्करप्रभृतिभिः देवैः सदा वन्दिता सा मां पातु सरस्वती भगवती निःशेषजाड्यापहा। शुक्लां ब्रह्मविचारसारपरमाम् आद्यां जगद्व्यापिनीं वीणापुस्तकधारिणीम् अभयदाम् जाड्यान्धकारापहाम्। हस्ते स्फाटिकमालिकां विदधतीं पद्मासने संस्थितां वन्दे तां परमेश्वरीं भगवतीं बुद्धिप्रदां शारदाम्।
Thank you. Now I will like to invite Mr. Adil Zainul Bhai, Chairperson, Capacity Building Commission, to kindly give us the welcome remarks.
Thank you and good evening, and welcome to a wonderful celebration of the book. So I'd like to start out by asking the audience, how many of you know Dr. Balu? Many of your friends are here, right? Okay. So I'm very happy that many of you know him and many of his friends are here and many of his admirers. I wanted to actually introduce Dr. Balu to you. Not that it's, it really needs introduction, but I want to talk about him with 4 words that describe Dr. Balu. They may not be the words you're thinking of. But anyway, for me, these are 4 very important words about Dr. Balu, and then I'll talk a little bit about the book, because if you know Dr. Balu, you will know about the book right away. So the first word I want to talk about him is, he is an intellectual. Okay? He thinks about things deeply, and just to give you some examples of his intellectual capability, most of us are very happy if we've studied one subject and are somewhat knowledgeable about it. Balu studied many, many subjects and did extremely well in many of them, and that's why I call him an intellectual. So for example, he started out as a doctor, right, and found that was too easy. So then he started spending time looking at development with people in the forest and with his tribals whom he goes back to all the time. And he's got a very deep, sorry? At BITS Pilani. And then he thought that wasn't enough, so he thought I need some more degrees. It doesn't look, there's still space on my card. And so then he went to Kennedy School and has made great friendships there. And I could go on and on the different subjects that he's really an expert on. And of course, one of them is leadership. And so that really, all of those things that he has done come together in this book. So first word that you should be aware of is he's an intellectual. He is not a lightweight, he is an intellectual. Second word that I want to talk about Dr. Balu is, so let me ask you, how many of you have written a book? Okay. How many of you have written 2 books? Oh God, there's some very big authors. How many of you have written 3 books? Now you don't raise your hand, please. How many of you have written 4 books? Now we're getting, so he's written, okay. How many have written 5? Okay, all right. Dr. Balu's written 7 books. I roughly tried writing 1 book and it is really tough. So anyone who writes 7, of course, deserves, great praise. So that's why I'm giving it to you. Third is, he really knows leadership. And, sometimes we spend all of our lives to be in the right position. And all the work that he has done on leadership is coming together in what he is contributing to leadership at the Capacity Building Commission, where we are trying to teach leadership to 3.5 million civil servants centrally and 22.5 million at the state level. And Balu is, the intellectual capital behind that. So that's the third word that I wanted to put in here, which is leadership. And the fourth word is, he builds things. He's not just a writer, he builds things. He has, I don't know if many of you are aware, he started the Vivekananda Youth Foundation. Movement, I'm getting all of this wrong, but anyway, it has something to do with youth and something to do with Vivekananda. Second, he's the chairman of the Social Stock Exchange, right? So he built that, and I know the amount of work that went into it. He has built the Capacity Building Commission. He's very clear. He's one of the folks who's built it. He built Gram. He's also a builder. He doesn't just talk about things, he actually gets it done. So that is my fourth word. And the last word, which I don't have to describe because you will immediately get it, is that he is a wonderful human being. And I think in my mind, those 5 words describe who Balu is more than any long resume that I could read out to you, okay? So now that you know where Balu comes from, I want to just spend a minute on the book. The first question which he writes in the preface, which I'm not going to read, is, do we need another book on leadership? I'm not going to ask you a question of how many books on leadership you have read in the audience, but no matter how many you have read, we do need a book like this, because this is the first book that has taken a lot of the intellectual rigor and capital and thinking and scholarship that has mostly been done in the Western world on leadership. You know, you can name a huge number of books on leadership that has been written in the Western world, and he has linked that and he has added to it by looking at the Indic roots and coming up with, I think, a much richer way to portray leadership. And he uses the personality of our leader, Narendra Modi, to explain those concepts that come out there. So it isn't just, it's not a biopic of the PM, it really is a very deep work on leadership, linking these two concepts, using Honorable Prime Minister as an example to illustrate those concepts. So Balu, those of you who have not read the book, I have read the book, it is wonderful, it's very easy to read, you will get a lot out of it. And as somebody told Balu, I can at least see 30 or 40 PhD theses coming out of this. So Balu is also creating work for the universities that he's affiliated with. So
Balasubramaniam to share the inspiration behind writing this book with us.
Good evening. This is indeed a very overwhelming moment for me in many ways than one. First is a launch of this kind. Somebody told me, you don't know Delhi. I truly don't know it. I've spent 3 years here. I don't think I can ever figure it out. Having lived for nearly 26 years with people in the forest, it's a very binary world there. Either they hate you or they love you. There's nothing in between. Here you're not sure. But then I'm overwhelmed not for that. I'm overwhelmed for the kind of friends and affection conferred on me to make this happen. Adil is... What he didn't say is, it takes a lot of compassion and kindness, and that's what Adil represents, to even speak what he did. Thank you, Adil, for that. So many people, George Orwell, the great author, once wrote, writing is possibly the most painful experience for an individual. And it's so difficult, and he asked himself, why do I write again and again and again? This is actually my 9th book, Adil. So, yeah. And when I had to actually start on this work, I was very nervous. Obviously, when you write about a person with close to 78% popularity, in a world that is, in a sense, very, very painfully binary, either they hate stuff or they love stuff. There's nothing in between. And people don't really stop back to objectively assess what is reality. And in a country where we talk of Maya and the world of illusion, and where fake is more real than real itself today, and in such a world to write something, to speak of something where either we romanticize India or we romanticize Indic wisdom to the point where people don't like it anymore, or we criticize it so much that people don't like it either. So in talking about leadership, my journey to the Kennedy School actually was to unpack what I thought was development, public policy, living and working with indigenous tribal communities, seeing firsthand the pain, the poverty inflicted on them by the state itself. I was a very, very angry young man who actually benevolently sued the state several times, and then found out that it's the policy which is all messed up, and their own inadequate understanding of people. And then I thought I need to figure out who are these people who make these policies. So that led me to the world of policy making and to Kennedy School, and I thought I can learn something there. I learned a lot there. More importantly, I learned that they don't have answers, but they have very structured frameworks to ask questions the right way. And I started on that journey and discovered more than 15 years ago that the real challenge for policy making is not the policy or the policy maker, It's a leadership that drives the policymaker to appreciate citizens as people, looking at people in their real living existence the way they are, immersing themselves into the experiences, the joys and tribulations of ordinary people. And so I decided, let me go deep into what drives leadership. And I learned as much as I could from the best of people around the world, and mostly the West. Then I stood back and somebody told me, why are you wasting your time? Why don't you look at Krishna? And look at his leadership. Till then, for me, the Bhagavad Gita was just a book which I read every day, Swami Chinmayananda's explanations. I used to listen to him a lot. It never occurred to me that this could possibly be the greatest positive psychology treatise, or it could be an extraordinary book for leadership. So that got me diving into it a little deeper. A few Upanishads, the Mahabharata, even stories like the Panchatantra or the Jataka tales are filled with leadership if you see them from that perspective. And I started putting it all together and went to my spiritual mentor and guru, Swami Sureshanji, who's not there anymore. And I used to discuss a lot with him every day. And during one of the course of the discussion, I told him, I'm discovering so much, I don't think there's anybody I know of who can embody all that I'm discovering. So is it even real? It's just, these characters are just figments of imagination, or could people like this actually exist? And he, in his wisdom, said, I'm a monk. You ask me about Advaita, I'll explain to you. You ask me about Viveka Chudamani of Shankara, I'll tell you what it is. But you ask me who lives it today, it's a little difficult to answer because I'm not even sure I'm living it every day. He was a very honest person. And then he told me something else. He said, I've heard, and this was more than 15 years ago when Sri Narendra Modi was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, I write this in the preface, that a young man came into the ashram once when he was a very young teenager, wanting to be a monk of the Ramakrishna order. And several monks have known him, they've been in touch with him, and they all feel that he might embody something that you're writing and talking to me about. So why don't you understand his life and see if you can make sense out of it? So I knew that I was sitting so far away in a forest in Karnataka, expecting me to even access information, expecting me to even reach out to him, get primary data, because we all only have visuals of what the media make out a person to be. We only have articles or statements. Those days there was no world of Twitter and all this that we see today, or language models which could analyze the tweets, etc. So I just gave it up. But I wrote another book called Leadership Lessons for Daily Living, where I tried to capture the essence of this. Thanks to my wife Bindu, who's here, she kept, every morning we would discuss this, what I was discovering, and she said, why don't you just write it and let the world know what it is? So ordinary people, auto rickshaw drivers, street vendors, monks, whom I met, who I thought are embodying some facets of it. So I thought collectively it could possibly tell people how to lead their lives. And that book came out. In my sense, it was the extraordinary leadership of what we generally dismiss off as ordinary people. And I stopped there. I thought my job is done. But 3 years ago, this unique opportunity to possibly participate in something which is extraordinary. Mission Karmayogi, I believe, truly is, its impact will not be seen today. It's like public health. You know, as a physician who also did some work in public health, if you're a surgeon, you see the results just after the operation is done. You're out of the operating room, you know you've done a good job or not. But if you're a public citizen, it's actually working and saving lives. So it's not a very glamorous profession, public health. And Mission Karmayogi is exactly like that. The investments we are making on building capacities of civil servants, where the myth that civil servants don't want to really perform is completely shattered. They really want to perform. That's been my great experience, understanding a lot of friends who are here in the audience today. And they really need to know how and what are the modern tools that we can embed them with. And so to me, I thought that's a great opportunity, and I came here. The person who called me to ask whether I would be interested is also sitting here. Vinayji is here. And then I was wondering, is it even something which I should be doing? And then here I am, and that gave me access to the Prime Minister, because the commission reports to him. And interactions, several one-to-one interactions with him, gave me a side of him which critics and admirers both don't see. Critics see it through their lens, the admirers see it through their lens. And both are not completely right. Sometimes they're completely wrong too. So seeing him from such close quarters, interacting with him, engaging with him, possibly asking him questions that might have sounded challenging to get my ideas right, possibly to maintain my intellectual integrity. As an academic, that's something it's priceless to me. At the same time, I know Indian scriptures are interpretational. The Bhagavad Gita is written by all the three great acharyas, the commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita, whether it is Shankaracharya or the Ramanujacharya or Madhvacharya, in their own ways of philosophical understanding, have interpreted and commented on the same treatise, the Bhagavad Gita. So it can be seen with the lens that any of us wear. And I know mine is an interpretational lens, and I'm looking at it through leadership, which itself is possibly a first-time exercise where I'm trying to actually make sense of all this and write it in a way which is at once academic, but is also practitioner-based toolkit. A friend recently sent a small clipping to me and Adil, and what he said makes such sense to me. He said, this is the best do-it-yourself kit I have had. So please don't call it a book anymore, he said. And for an author, it makes his day. And to me, this is truly, in my own opinion, the George Orwell description of the pain, the problems, the frustrations. Adil travels a lot to the US, and you would call me knowing fully well I would be awake at 3 a.m. and in India, and I would start writing because I was very conscious that I wouldn't let anything else come in the way of my office work. It's been a journey of love. It's been a journey of real challenges, finding the balance, finding objectivity amidst all the noise that we have in this world outside. And the only thing I can all ask you is judge the book by what is inside. Please read it. It can be the harshest critic of leadership. And remember, you're criticizing Indic leadership in its completeness. Obviously, everything cannot be written about it. It's 20 books trying to be more put into one. That itself was a challenge. I had promised myself it will not be more than 250 pages. It's actually 251, the actual book, the content. It's got a huge, all my research notes, not all of it, all that matters for the book is there. There's a big glossary. Several friends worked with me, and they're all sitting here, and most of them don't like to be named. I had a great research team. I have to thank them for bearing with me. I would push them very hard. Long research discussion meetings were really painful possibly to them. They never complained. I had a lot of young friends in my office who made sure that as much as I made sure that my office time was not used to anything that I wanted, they would have the same standards and ethics in their lives too. But it's been great fun. And the real fun is if you actually read it. And my hope, when you write about all this, is to awaken the leader inside you. Every one of us is capable. We got to discover it. So this book should serve as a mirror for you to look at, see the reflection, and you can only see it if you wipe the dust away. And that's by reading what is inside. And once you do that and decide to apply it in real life, I think that will be the true journey for this nation itself. And again, I thank everybody who's been on this journey with me. It's a long list, and fortunately or unfortunately, most of them don't want to be named, Adil including, but I'm naming him. And it's been a journey which I don't think I'll have the courage to repeat, but you never know, an author like Orwell said. He said, again, painfully we go back to writing, he said. He said, what is that demon inside us that possesses us so much that we have to go back to writing? So hopefully, now that I laid down my academic positions in the US, I hope to have a little more time to actually start putting other thoughts. Even the journey of meeting the Prime Minister and discussing with him is another book by itself. Someday when I have the energy back, I will write about it. And thank you all for coming here. A Friday evening in Delhi, you're actually changing my view of Delhi itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Balu. Indeed, you do make the lesson for us that we should awaken the leaders inside us, and working with you is a privilege for all the team members here. Now I will request Dr. Balu to kindly welcome Mr. Ajay Piramal to give the welcome remarks.
You know, several days ago, I don't know if Piramalji's office has possibly shared the other side of the story to him. I just suddenly got a call from one of his colleagues saying that Mr. Ajay Piramal wants to meet you. And when can he come? I said, God willing, let him not come. I told him, what do you mean? He can't come. I will come. Please tell me where is he going to be. I will come and meet him. Now, I say this not because of anything else. You know, people actually truly live their greatness by being simple. And that's all I can say about Ajayji. Anybody who knows Piramal Industries knows he's the chairman of the group. Dr. Swati is also here today. Such a, if you can call, I've written a lot on compassionate capitalism. And that's what the social stock exchange is what we're trying to do. I think he embodies that. And so for us in our country, to have somebody who genuinely believes that his wealth is given to him to be a custodian and to make sure that his work is not in making the money, but in spending it wisely for India's progress. I think Ajay Piramal represents that. So it's truly an honor for me and a privilege. And he made sure he read the book. And he said every employee of mine should read this book now. And so that makes it all the more priceless for me. And more importantly, he made the time. Today was a day when I knew the pressures of time on Adil and he. They all changed. Several of you have changed your programs to be here today. That's an overwhelming feeling, I said, of the affection that stands in this room. So I thank you and I welcome you for this thing. And I'm looking forward to listening to him because he's actually going to speak from his heart, from what I have written in the book also, I hope. Thank you so much.
Sir, please come on the stage and give your remarks.
Adil, as the host of this meeting today, Mr. Kant, Dr. Balu, Debjani Ghosh, Professor Mahadevan, ladies and gentlemen. After hearing both Adil, who as head of McKinsey for many years I used to listen to, rarely spoke when he was there, and Dr. Balu with all his intellectual strength, I'm just wondering what am I doing here to launch this book. So I'm actually I'm a misfit here, but let me now try. Since you have called me, I want to thank you all for giving me this honor to launch a book which, as Dr. Balu said, I read with great interest. And when I see the title of the book, of looking within leadership, I recollect the analogy of an iceberg. You see only the tip of an iceberg when you're in the water. What we don't see is really the base and the whole body of the iceberg, which is what really gives it the strength and the stability. Whereas the tip is what it is to become impactful, you need the base. To become powerful, you need the base. To become sustainable, you need the base. And in some ways, when you see the leadership and the successes which the Honorable Prime Minister has had over the more than 20 years in public life, you realize that that is the tip of the iceberg. The success, whether it is in the economy, it's in infrastructure, cultural, social development, is just the tip. What Dr. Balu helps us to understand is what is that solid base, the solid body, which helps him to do all this successfully. The unseen and the immense strength that is there behind it. And hence, I think this book is really unique. As you said in your preface, and as I also used to learn management, and we used to have a whole course, a special course on only leadership at Harvard. There are many books on leadership, but I haven't ever come across a book like this, which really distills the Indic philosophy, which is very difficult to distill, as you know, and very vast, and shows how leadership can be done and how it is different in some ways to the Western. But what Dr. Balu has done is to bring the best of what we know Indic philosophy and the West together. I hope it'll become a sort of reading, mandatory reading, and I think Professor Mahadevan is here. I would think that he would do that as well. I'm speaking here today, which I don't do, is that I've had the good fortune and the privilege of having known the Prime Minister before he also became the Chief Minister of Gujarat. So this is a relationship which goes much beyond 2 decades. And I have seen him. We all know about the visible qualities, but I have seen and experienced and learnt a lot of some of those hidden qualities. And I'm going to spend a little time just sharing this with you. These are my own observations. I don't know if they are right or wrong, but these are the learnings, because I've seen that every interaction with him is just one more lesson towards learning. I'd like to say that his leadership is, besides so many other things, there are 4 fundamental principles that I would like to define my understanding of his leadership. The first, and this is in the 4 S's I'd like to call them, because Adil, you started with 4, so let me just follow you. The first is Sadachar, or the alignment with values. We all know that leadership anywhere and everywhere in the world is often a compromise for power, position, possessions. But what you find in Modi ji is really a person who values value above valuables. His learning of our Indic Shastras, his upbringing, his teachings from his gurus have really installed this principle. And I want to share a personal example with you. It was just a few years ago, and there were state elections. He had campaigned and had finished his campaigning and had returned. And you know how every campaign, state or central, is driven by him personally and led by him. There was then the time of the results was there, the date of the results. And this was a very important election. It was on that day that I got an appointment to meet with him. First of all, I was surprised that, this is the day the whole country is anxiously waiting as to what the result is on that day. And here he is giving me, I'm not that important for him to give an appointment. But it was given. I went there, met him. It was like half an hour meeting. And I can tell you that I was anxious to see if there's a TV to find out what the results were, but he was most unconcerned. And not only was it my appointment, but he had a series of appointments that day. So I just asked him that, sir, you're not worried, or you don't want to know what the results were? He said, no, abhi to kaam ho gaya hai, jo hoga we'll come to know. And that's when I realized that what Krishna, Dr. Balu, you spoke about leadership, what Krishna says to Arjuna in the Gita, this is in the 2nd chapter, verse 48, which he says, perform action, O Dhananjay, abandoning attachment, being steadfast in yoga, and balanced in success and failure, evenness of mind is called yoga. And this is what he was practicing, what he must have heard and learned from all the gurus in action. Sadachar was the first value. I think the second value has been seva, or alignment with his purpose. As I have seen his life, and you talked about from the teenage time when he wanted to join the Ramakrishna mission, I think his purpose has been seva. For him, that is more important than anything else. And therefore, when he first took over the role as Prime Minister, he said, I am not Prime Minister, but I am a Pradhan Mantri, but Pradhan Sevak. And I think in every action, and again, quoting from the Upanishads, I think he has shown it in every action. Your book states, Doctor, a quote from the Upanishads, which is, I think, very relevant. You are what your deep driving desire is. As is your desire, so is your will. As is your will, so is your deed. And as is your deed, so is your destiny. So here again, he has this deep desire to see that he can uplift every Indian out of poverty. And this desire has led to the destiny in terms of at least 250 million people in the last few years moving out of poverty. I think this journey is not over. His desire, I'm sure, is to lift even the bottommost people left, and that should be the destiny of his and our country. And I can see this happening again with a personal example. In 2017, it was the Honorable Prime Minister's vision, ably executed by our Mr. Amitabh Kant as the Niti Aayog CEO, when he said that let's look at the most underdeveloped districts of the country. These districts whose GDP or whose human development indices were less than or worse than half, or even less than half of the rest of the country. And he called them the aspirational districts. That was the time when he, I'm sure, egged on by Mr. Amitabh Kant, asked us to work on those 112 districts. And I can say that with all honesty, that even today, from that time onwards, he is interested to know the progress that we are doing on it. Now, there's so many things a Prime Minister has to do, but the fact that he feels for the last person, I think, is important. The third thing, besides Sadachar and Seva, the third S to me is Shiksha, or learning. He learns not only from the Shastras, reading it, but also gathers wisdom from listening and meeting different people. Coming from the background of a humble tea seller of the railway station today, today he can talk on the latest technologies, on AI, on data, on space, and so on. And why is it? I think he believes that wisdom comes from listening and absorbing things. Again, people say he's arrogant, but if you are listening to people, you can never be arrogant. Humility is the first part. That's why you know that somebody else knows more than I do. And again, if I can say a personal example, this was in 2013. It was when the BJP had appointed him as the leader of the party in the elections at 2014. He wanted to understand what is it that the world's most successful economies have done, what is it that India needs to do, and we organized a group of very eminent economists, both from the US and India, to meet with him. He was Chief Minister of Gujarat then. It was a 5-hour meeting. Trust me, every minute he was focused and listening. There was not a single interruption. You know, you like to see the phone, you say I have to, somebody else calls you, appointment, nothing like that. 5 hours, listened very attentively, asked a very few important, pertinent questions. I can tell you that some of you may have experienced it, but at least I needed to just get out for some time, so I made up that I have to go and take a washroom break. So intense it is. And this is how he's absorbing the learnings all of the time. The fourth quality after sadachar, seva, shiksha is sadhana, or alignment with the self. With his whole practice of yoga, his dhyan, his dharana, his meditation, you find that he is connecting to his true self and higher powers. And this gives him the energy and the stamina which at least I have not seen anybody else have, who for so many decades I think has never taken a holiday, who works like I don't know how many hours, 14 hours a day, non-stop, goes on and on and on. There is something special in this. In fact, I know that there was, when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat, he used to take a trip to foreign countries of businessmen trying to encourage, to invite foreign investment in India. The trips were so hectic that the businessmen decided that half of us will go in the morning and half will go in the second shift. So we worked 2 shifts, he worked continuous. So that is the amount of energy that he had. So if I can just conclude the 4 S's of his leadership that I understand, there may be many more, I may be wrong, but in my view, sadachar, seva, shiksha, and sadhana. And all this actually gives another 5th S, which is Shakti, which gives him the strength and the power. Today, and the recognition, today he's the longest serving leader of the free world today. And we have seen brave measures which nobody had thought of for 70 years. Some for 500 years, whether it is Article 370, whether it is the surgical strikes, whether it's the Ram Janmabhoomi, and so many others. So I think there's a lot to learn, and I would just like to thank Dr. Balu that you have brought this all up for us. We will learn from your book, and my best wishes for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your inspiring remarks. Now I request Mr. Ajay Piramal and all the dignitaries on the stage to kindly launch the book for us. Can we have the books, please? We have a small request for the audience now. You all must have received a copy of the book, so we request you to kindly pick the book and launch it for us. Can we have a photo of this, please? Thank you. A huge round of applause for everyone. So now we have another session for the evening, which is going to be a very interesting panel discussion by the distinguished guests we have on the stage. And this session will be moderated by Ms. Shireen Bhan, MD, CNBC Group. I request her to please come on stage.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute honor to be here this evening. We're going to swap seats there, Johnny. Okay, this is what is called a do-over. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being here this evening. And it is an absolute privilege and a pleasure to be here in this August gathering to talk about a book that is written by Dr. Balu. I've had the pleasure of reading the book, and I've also had the pleasure of having a conversation with Dr. Balu about the book and his thoughts about the Prime Minister's legacy on the day that the new government was being sworn in. Just to borrow from what we heard from Mr. Zainul Bhai earlier today, and he gave us 4 attributes that define, to his mind, Dr. Balu. I'll just add a 5th to that, because very often when you do interviews and you finish with the interview, you very rarely hear back from an interviewer instantly. And what was very interesting to me was that the interview got over, and I got a message from Dr. Balu, I think even before the program had ended, saying thank you very much, I really enjoyed our session. But what I now want to talk to you about is the social stock exchange. So let me add to that, saying that he is a doer with all his intellectual heft. He is also a doer, so adding to Dr. Zainul Bhai's attributes for Dr. Balu. Since Mr. Piramal brought up the attributes in the form of S, I would say that my interaction with Dr. Balu has put on the table another S, and I would say that that's Sadbhavna, compassion and empathy, which thank you so much for sharing that with all of us. But without further ado, I know we're stretched for time. We have a wonderful guest list here on the panel this evening, and I'm a quick learner, so taking a cue from Mr. Piramal, I will listen, assimilate, and absorb, and let the panel do all the talking. Amitabh Kant needs no introduction. Mr. Piramal, thank you again for being here. Debjani Ghosh and Professor Mahadevan, thank you so much for joining us here. Let me, move away from attributes of leadership and talk to the panel a little bit about the outcomes of leadership in the recent past. And let me start with you, Mr. Kant. Let's talk about leadership in the context of diplomacy. And I want to talk to you in the context of what we did during the G20 presidency, because there was a lot of trepidation, there was a lot of nervousness on whether we will finally get a New Delhi declaration or not. I was there in that room in the morning where it wasn't clear whether a declaration would be signed or not. And you walked in there, and finally there was a smile on your face, and it looked like, okay, the deal is done. But through what happened, not just in the 48 hours to get that declaration done, but through the course of the presidency, explain to me the leadership that India displayed and what you took away from that. You'll have to use this one as well.
So Shireen, first and foremost, the Prime Minister, when the theme of the presidency was being selected, which was critical, the Prime Minister went into the roots of Indian civilization, which was to take it back to Vasudev Kutumbakam, and he said that while we may have different geographical boundaries, we may have different political ideologies, but we must in G20 all act as one. For the common good of the citizens. And that remained the overwhelming philosophy throughout G20. And actually, we were passing through a very, very complex and a very difficult phase of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, and it was across all ministerials that we suffered, actually, for lack of consensus. And it was broadly felt by everyone that we'll not be able to arrive at consensus. But despite that, the Prime Minister was very clear that we must be ambitious, we must be very, very inclusive, we must be decisive, and we must be very action-oriented. These were the 4 things he defined it. And the first and foremost was that we made it inclusive by making G20 into a G21 by bringing African Union as a member of G20. So by one stroke, we included 55 countries of Africa as a member of G20. Secondly, we were able to push the boundaries on all these areas. We were able to bring consensus on almost 212 outcomes and 83 paras. This has never happened before. And, one para, the Russia-Ukraine crisis, it took us 300 hours of negotiation. It took us about close to 16 drafts failed. Only the 17th draft succeeded. We had about 258 bilaterals meetings for that. But all through, the Prime Minister was getting a situation report every 2 hours. He said, I want consensus. And he talked to me and he said that in case, you should tell these people that if G20 cannot arrive at a consensus, India will not be a part of G20. And with 6 hours to go, we had not arrived at a consensus at that point. And 6 hours to go, the last Sherpa meeting, I just walked into the hall. We knew everybody's red line. We said, this is the last and final draft. You take it, either you take it or you lump it, and if you don't accept it, India will not be a part of G20. India will work with BRIC. India will work with IPSA, but not be a part of G20. That's my leader has seen this draft, and he feels very strongly that this is the best draft. And we had all the emerging markets together. The Brazil said that, his Sherpa said that Lula has seen it. The South African Sherpa said, his president said it. And I said within 3 hours, you either say yes or no. This happened at 12:30 in the night. By 4 o'clock in the morning, I had a yes from all the G7 countries. That could happen only because of the stature and standing of the Prime Minister. He had traveled to ASEAN, he traveled to America, had built up a very good relationship with Putin, with Biden, and all countries eventually said yes, and if it wasn't for India, this consensus would never have been arrived at. So India achieved consensus because of his leadership, India achieved inclusivity because of his leadership, and India made it very, very action-oriented. This was the story of G20, really. And then, we received consensus from all the G7 countries, but USA, we had not yet received it. So in the morning, Bharat Mandapam at 8 o'clock to inspect the Bharat Mandapam, and he asked me, ki, kya hua? So I said, sir, abhi uspe thoda aur kaam baki hai. So he said, then I started telling him, so he said, nahi, mujhe procedure nahi, outcome batao. So he's very outcome oriented, totally outcome oriented. And so I said, nahi sir, abhi batata hu aapko thodi. So I phoned up the American Sherpa at about 8:15, and the American Sherpa said, Amitabh, we want 2 things. One is we want a change of 1 word, and we want China and Russia to agree first. So then I phoned up the Chinese Sherpa, whose yes we had not got. So the Chinese Sherpa said, yes, because all emerging markets are together, we'll agree, but there's one para which we want to change. So I said, why? You've already agreed to everything. So he said, no, one para is that America will hold G20 in 2026. So he said, my Prime Minister who's come feels that the Americans don't issue visas to China, so you should to withdraw that. So the meeting started, and I sat in the next room with the American Sherpa, the Chinese Sherpa. We negotiated for 3.5 hours. The Chinese wanted a written guarantee, but we used the word ensure, and we finally clinched it at 12:30. And 1 o'clock, the Prime Minister announced that there is a consensus, and we clinched it on the first day. So that was all because of that leadership. He said he was totally outcome oriented on that. So that's how G20 was clinched finally.
Well, Ladies and gentlemen, you got a backstory here from the man himself, the Sherpa representing India.
So, two things. Many people say that the Prime Minister he gets into a lot of micro details, but the Prime Minister also gives you a lot of delegated power. Throughout the G20, he gave me all the authority and all the power, but he wanted me to deliver the outcomes on that. And he was absolutely clear, make it inclusive, make it decisive, but deliver the G20 to me. And that's what we were able to do, but all because of his stature, his standing, his personal relationship that he had built up.
I will talk to you about two other specific instances where there has been leadership and political will and political capital. Mr. Piramal talked about the aspirational districts program. I'll come to that in just a second, but I also do want to talk to you about Swachh Bharat because you and Paramaiyar worked very closely with the Prime Minister on that. I'll come back to you in just a second, but let me get Debjani Ghosh into the conversation. Debjani, another area in the recent past where India has shown leadership which is recognized and acknowledged globally is in technology and specifically in being able to set up a digital public infrastructure and ensure that it is being seen as a public good, which is something that the G20 also recognized. How do you see this? How do you believe that this has become globally accepted? What do you believe has led to the kind of leadership and resilience that India has shown specifically in this area?
Again, I go back to what Mr. Kant said, which is when you talk about DPI, we talk about the outcome of DPI. Yes, there is a whole process to it. There's the technology stack. But the story, the narrative is being built around the numbers. The narrative is being built around the impact of DPI, the inclusive goal, the population level scale of technology, which no other country has achieved, right? And this is what really stands out. It is an outcome-driven narrative. And, when I talk to a lot of my peers, colleagues outside India, governments outside India, DPI today has become a mindset. It is about thinking outside the box. It is about challenging status quo. Before DPI, the thinking was innovation has to be top-driven. Innovation starts from the top. Innovation's for the rich. It starts from the top, and then you figure out how to scale it. So you keep diluting till it scales, right? And that's been the tech mantra. And all of a sudden, here's India, and I think we did it with DPI, and I also did it with the vaccine strategy, India vaccine story, where we completely challenged that status quo to say, no, we are going to innovate bottoms up. We are going to start from the last woman, the last person out there, and we have to ensure that that person does not get left behind. So now how do you build inclusive technology? So DPI has become more of a mindset of thinking outside the box, challenging status quo, building ecosystem-led versus monopoly-led, an approach. It's about building technology that you trust, because only then will technology scale. So I think the fact that we have been able to talk DPI with numbers, with proven outcome, the fact that a Google, a Paytm, a PhonePe, everybody is participating. It's truly inclusive, even from that perspective. It has made a huge difference. And yeah, there are different approaches to the stack, but it is the design principles and it is the mindset of DPI that really stands out. And I think what this has done is it has really established India as a leader with respect to inclusive technology and human-centric technology, which is so important in today's world of AI. This is the biggest challenge in AI, right? And if there's one country that can truly stand up and talk with facts about how to create human-centric technology, without doubt, it is India.
Well, I will talk to you about AI and the leadership role that India can possibly play in an AI world and what leadership will mean in an AI world in just a second. But let me get Mr. Piramal into the conversation as well. Mr. Piramal, the aspiration of making India a developed economy, the aspiration of moving the per capita from 2,500 to 4,000, 5,000, and what that will eventually mean as far as driving consumption and investment is concerned. From a leadership perspective, how do you look at the kind of reforms that have been undertaken, the will shown in taking tough decisions, and what would the expectation now be in terms of the road ahead?
I think clearly that there is a will to do it. It's not only a will. If you look at even the statements which have been made by the Honorable Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, I think they recognize that it is the wealth creators have to be given an opportunity to build this, and I think it is going to happen. There is a lot of reform still needed. It's not that it's not needed. There is reform needed. I think I personally feel that we have to get some of the regulations to be simpler. I do feel that the judicial reform is required. The time that's taken is too much. And I feel that some of the regulators sometimes are really, I think, regulating it. They have to regulate in an economy which is growing and in a growth stage. It is not an economy which has already reached the top. So therefore, I think that mindset has to change as well. And there are, of course, specific reforms that we don't need to. But I think the way people have confidence and the encouragement that has been given to both youth and the young industry, that is possible, that will happen. I mean, no other country has the growth rates and the solid financial and the economic strength that we have today. But there are issues that we need to still look at. I think the bottommost people are still lagging behind. If we don't bring them up, and that's where, you know, the aspirational districts and all the others count. If we don't do that, the gap will just increase significantly between the people who have a GDP of 10,000 and the others who may have just 2,000.
No, absolutely. We need to ensure that we don't see a widening of those inequities and we in fact see a bridging of those. But Professor Mahadevan, let me come to you because as as Mr. Piramal actually said that this should be made mandatory reading in colleges and across universities. But let me get you to articulate for us what you found was unique and special about your interpretation of the book, as well as the parallels, as well as what is unique about the Indic way of leadership versus the Western style of leadership that we're more accustomed to.
Yeah, so let me first start, since you talk so much about action-oriented thing, let me first start by saying how would a person who is groomed in the Indic style of leadership will act, will behave. That's the outcome of that, rather than talking about the concepts and so on. Three things will distinctly happen. The book brings it so beautifully. And these three things are generally, in common parlance, understood to be on two sides of the coin. A person who is groomed in the Indic style of leadership, with all its scriptural understanding which he has so nicely brought about, gentleness and firmness will coexist in the same person. Strength and gentleness. People think strength means dadagiri. This is the kind of a mindset people have. If somebody has strength, that means you can bulldoze anything. And somebody is gentle, they think, oh, okay, he's a nice person. Whereas the Indic style of leadership will groom both of them. What would appear like two ends of the spectrum we'll see in the same person. First thing, I find that very nicely brought out in this. Great faith will coexist with broad-mindedness. Today, again, people think faith is narrow-mindedness. I don't know where from this narrative has come, but we seem to have this kind of an opinion. This Indic style of leadership will ensure that the person will have great faith and broad-mindedness. The third thing that will happen is a person who is of this nature, compassion and empathy will be on one side, firmness will be on the other side. Both will coexist. So what seemingly appears to be different shades of a character will all find place in the same person. The book brings it out so beautifully. So this is about the outcome part of it. Now, in a nutshell, what is this Indic leadership? How is it different from the Western notions of leadership, which most of us keep teaching in these universities here? Okay. I think the most important thing, and that's where I really loved the title of the book, is the clinching deal between Indian leadership, Indian style of leadership, and the Western style of leadership. Is the Indian style of leadership very strongly recognizes that there is a world within as much as a world without. The entire Western literature, I have been researching leadership theory for the last 30 years. I have seen 35, 40 theories which have come. And all of them are heading towards the understanding that if you can't talk to yourself, you can't communicate to anyone. If you cannot lead yourself, you cannot lead anyone. If you cannot inspire yourself, you cannot inspire anyone. If you are not happy, you can never make anyone happy. In fact, we don't have to go that far. If we have to understand the basic mechanisms of why leadership will fail, all that we need to do is read chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita. Such a great leader, in the 46th shloka, he says, I am an ashastra pani, dhartarashtra shastrapaneha, rane me hanyuhu kshemataram bhavet. A great warrior says, I don't have any weapons with me, he has already dropped it. And he says, all these Dhritarashtra's sons are all having weapons, let them kill me now. This is called failed leadership. So the question that begs attention in Bhagavad Gita at the very beginning is, why is it a great leader has completely succumbed? Why has he become, I call him a failed leader. Arjuna is a leader, but he failed miserably because he could not understand what is called world within. And that's why Bhagavad Gita is a great treatise on actually leadership. One more I will say, which is very contrasting from the Western style of leadership. Which is what we also have been teaching. Western style of leadership, whether you explicitly put it or you don't, the basic emphasis is leaders somewhere operate with what is called what is in it for me. Not in a derogatory sense, don't take it that way. There is this underlying current of what is in it for me. That's why, there is also, it says, prayojanam anuddishya mandopina pravartate. Even a dull head does not go without a prayojana. Those kinds of things are there even in our scriptures. But this notion of what it means not to be what is in it for me so beautifully has come in this book. In fact, in Gita, again, there is a beautiful shloka. He says, Name parthasi kartavyam trishu lokeshu kinchana nanavaptam avaptavyam vartayevacha karmani. He says, my wish list is zero. Krishna says, my wish list is zero. But that doesn't mean I'm going to just sit doing nothing. That gives a certain sense of detaching ourselves. He has so beautifully brought it in the book, how it grows detachment, how it gives a certain strength and authenticity in decision making. All these are actually part of Indic leadership. If you look at our scriptures, Gita, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Upanishad, all these so beautifully comes. But the nice thing about this book is he has distilled it so beautifully, it relieves us from the pain of reading all that, and it has come so nicely here.
Well, that's high praise for you, Dr. Balu, coming in there from Professor Mahadevan. But Mr. Kant, you wanted to come in on the point that Devjani was making as far as DPI, the digital public infrastructure is concerned, and India's leadership there. And let me also then add my question so that you can answer it in one go. The leadership that was shown as far as the aspirational district program was concerned, the outcome that has led to, as well as on Swachh Bharat, because, to have the audacity and the ambition to make a claim that India would be open defecation free, etc., that required political leadership, political capital. Take me through the experience of having worked on both those missions.
So, firstly, this title, Power Within, I think that a lot of that power within comes from his own courage of conviction and from his ability to do very relentless preparedness. And before all this digital fast payment started, one day he called me up. He'd gone abroad and he landed up in Hyderabad, post demonetization era. He said, "Ye digital payment ko drive karo Niti Aayog se." So and he said, "Ye 100 din mein 100 digital mele karo." So I couldn't understand wo 100 din mein 100 digital mele. So I anyway, we worked the whole night and we said, these are the different ways you can use the mobile to do, you'd recall that period, you can do digital payments. Then next day in the morning, I went to the Principal Secretary, Mr. Nipin Mishra, and I said, sir, ये PM के निर्देश हैं, 100 दिन में 100 digital मेले ये तो हो ही नहीं सकते. तो बहुत मुश्किल काम है सर ये तो और 100 शहरों में 100 दिन में 100 डिजिटल मेले करो. तो ही सेड भाई ये तो बहुत मुश्किल काम है पर ये तुम ही समझाओ चल के. तो ही सेड वो एक प्रेजेंटेशन तैयार करो, चलो प्रेजेंटेशन करते हो और कैबिनेट सेक्रेटरी को भी ले चलो. तो वी प्रिपेयर्ड अ प्रेजेंटेशन एंड देन Mr. P.K. Sinha was there, Mr. Nipin Mishra was there, I was there, I made the presentation. So, you know, after the 7th slide, I said, sir, आपके वो निर्देश हैं, 100 दिन में 100 डिजिटल मेले, 100 शहरों में, बड़ा मुश्किल है सर, ये इसको अच्छी तरह करने दीजिए, थोड़ा होमवर्क करके करते हैं, ब्रांडिंग वगैरह करके अच्छी तरह. He said, नहीं, वो 100 दिन में ही 100 करो. So I went on, then I went to about the 18th slide or something, then I said, sir, वो सर थोड़ा समय दीजिए, बहुत अच्छी तरह करना चाहते हैं, इसको सक्सेस बनाना है, ये वो. He said, नहीं, मैंने कहा है 100 दिन में ही करो, 100 और 100 ही डिजिटल मेले करो. तो I kept quiet, and then, you know, at the end of about the 28th or 29th slide, which was nearing completion, again I went, I said, sir, आपके निर्देश हैं, प्रधानमंत्री जी के जो निर्देश होंगे वो तो पूरा करेंगे, पर सर थोड़ा समय दीजिए, अच्छी तरह करना चाहते हैं इसको और इसको सक्सेस बनाना है. He said, नहीं, मैंने कह दिया है, 100 दिन में बार बार ये मत बात करो, 100 दिन में. So that was the end of it all. And I tell you, we got, in those 100 days, we got RBI, we got NPCI, we got the private sector, we got all the state governments, everybody together in 100 days and 100 digital melas. And if we hadn't done this, today we do 130 billion fast payments in a year. We do 46% of the real-time fast payments in the world. China does only 26 billion. If we hadn't done those, looking back, it was his courage of conviction, his determination, his ability, his vision, which saw us push those 100 digital melas. If we hadn't done this, we would have never got RBI, we'd never have got NPCI, we would have never got all the private banks and the public banks together. We would have never got the private sector of India together to be able to drive the digital payment movement. And that's how it happened. And I think there was relentless preparedness for that, which he made us do. So I'm only speaking from my experience. And similarly for aspirational district, you know, because when he said कि भाई ये जितनी backward district है उसको improve करो, 1 preparation, 2 preparation, 3 preparation, 4 preparation, 4 presentation, 5 presentation. Then he finally, after 5th presentation, he said कि भाई ये मुझे केवल data चाहिए, मुझे केवल governance चाहिए, मुझे केवल outcome चाहिए. I've never heard a political leader talking about outcomes. I've never heard a political leader, I've been 44 years in government, other than this Prime Minister, I've never heard a political leader talk about outcomes or data or governance. And these are the 3 things on which his philosophy revolves. Data, good governance, and outcome. Deliver on outcomes. And that's what we managed to do. We brought in real-time data on a minute-to-minute basis, and that is how, you know, the Baramulla collector walked into my room. He said, sir, I'm coming 5th. I'll make up 5 days to go for that month. He said, I'll make up for it and I'll make sure I come first. I opened the computer in front of him. By that time, he'd left Baramulla and come to Delhi. He'd moved to 8th position. So I said, tum 5th nahi, 8th aa rahe ho. He went back, worked very hard, but he could only come 3rd, but because it was real-time data working on all these outcomes. So I think that if India has to transform, it can only happen on real-time data, which was not possible when I was a young officer. It's possible now in today's world. And the third thing, what he made us do for the Startup India movement. I mean, again, 5, 6 rounds of presentations to him. He said, nahi, wo is ministry mein incubation hai, is ministry mein regulatory procedures hai, wahan licensing hai, labor laws hai, ye hai, wo hai, ye theek karo, wo theek karo. 6, one after another, 6 presentations. Relentless work, relentless hard work. And that's how, after that, we launched it. He made only no political leader, no officer will sit with him, only the startups sat with him that day. And those startups, that time we had just 156 startups in India. Today we have 126,000 startups in India. We have over 126 unicorns in India. I mean, our funding has gone up 30x, our incubators have gone up 18x. That's all a consequence of that vision of leadership which has transformed, and that's a consequence of the outcome. And I think the same thing with Swachh Bharat. No leader from the rampart of Red Fort has talked about toilets, about cleanliness, about Swachh Bharat, and involving all these have been mass movements. All these have been community-led. And every time he said this to us, कि प्रोग्राम तब तक मत शुरू करो जब तक कम्युनिटी पार्टिसिपेशन नहीं हो, जब तक प्रिपेयर्डनेस नहीं हो, जब तक सब लोग को साथ नहीं लोगे, नहीं तो ये सब इम्प्लीमेंटेशन में खराब होगा. एंड दैट इज व्हाई यू हैव टू डू दैट होमवर्क अगेन एंड अगेन, कीप गोइंग बैक टू द टेबल, keep going back to the drawing table again and again, and that vision, that conviction, that courage of conviction, that ability to make you do hard work, and then because he has trust and faith in you, then your ability to build a team to be able to deliver, all that is very critical to my mind, and this is all based on my personal experience.
Kant, you've got many awards in your life, but I have to say that you should get the most courageous award for having asked the Prime Minister to reconsider his target 4 times over in one presentation. So that's quite something. But Devjani, let's talk about India in an AI era and the kind of leadership that you believe that we can demonstrate and what you believe will be necessary as we move forward.
See, the biggest problem right now with AI is everyone's building it, but no one knows what problem it's going to solve. And how are you going to monetize it? What's going to be the impact? Everyone is focused on investment. Just last year, within the top big companies in US, they would have spent anything between 80 to 100 billion just building AI, right? The second big problem in AI is, given that it is being built by a handful of companies in a handful of countries, how do you ensure that this is truly going to be inclusive? How do you ensure that it will represent the concerns, the culture, the context of every single country and every single citizen? Or is it going to represent just what the builders wanted to represent, right? So, and is it going to significantly increase the divide between the haves and the have-nots? When you think of all of this, and then you think from an India perspective, and this is what I'm just so passionate about when I'm talking about AI at a global context, the lessons that India has frankly given to the world with respect to DPI and building inclusive trade is right now what the world needs to understand, internalize. That here is a proven model on how to build population scale inclusive technology. I keep repeating this because no one else has done it. And it is fascinating what we have been able to do with this, right? The lessons in it, the design principles, when you think about DPI, the design principles, the operating principles are extremely easy to take to the AI narrative and the AI debate, right? Building an open ecosystem, building an interoperable ecosystem, right? Building an ecosystem-led ecosystem. So I think India is tremendously well poised to do 2 things. One, change the narrative to human-centric, inclusive AI, democratization of AI. And I do believe that we are best placed to do it. Second, be the leader with respect to how do you scale AI? How do you take AI, how do you make AI real? How do you use AI to solve problems, agriculture, climate change, I mean, whatever have you. But what do you do? And therefore, I'm very, very happy that, the Prime Minister and Mighty went ahead and announced this AI mission. Because when you look at the AI mission, no country, by the way, has done anything like this. No country has. And there are a lot of questions about why is India doing this? Why is the government getting involved? I think this is a fantastic step, and the government has to get involved because that's when you create that equitable access to the technology. If this was a corporate doing it, like you have in other countries, you would not be able to build that inclusive access. So what we have done in AI Mission completely stands out. Now, how do we take this to usage models? How do we take this to solve real problems? I would love to see India be the leader with respect to impact, and not just building AI for the sake of building AI.
You're absolutely right. Everyone's talking about AI, and we're still yet to figure out the best use cases as well as monetization. I think all of that is a work in progress. But Mr. Piramal, since you have read the book and you gave us a very brief summary of your interpretation of the Prime Minister's leadership attributes, I want to understand from you, what do you take away from the book in terms of lessons, meaningful lessons that you would like to incorporate in the boardroom, that you would like to incorporate within the organization? You talked about alignment at various levels, and I think the art of management is aligning the back end with the front end effectively. What would you take away as the biggest learning and lesson from the book that you would like to incorporate in practice?
One of the lessons that I really learned, and I try to incorporate that, is also about the courage to take bold decisions across the, and it requires, it's easy for us in a boardroom to take a courageous decision very often, but to take it with 1.4 billion people is not easy. I think that's a big lesson that I've learned from this. And I think, again, I have to give Dr. Balu really credit, because he's pulled out from so many scriptures. I mean, whether it is Panchatantra on one side, you see the Veda on the other side, you see Gita, you see Mahabharata, you see Ramayana, different parts of it. And I think one has to go into much more depth and really absorb everything, because initial reading alone will not do justice to this book. So I think it has to be...
Have you been inspired now to make a bold decision? What is going to be the bold decision that you're going to make, Mr. Piramal?
First bold decision is to really understand in depth the book, and really, there are so many basic principles that the book has said. Whatever I said actually is he has only said it. I incorporated what he has said into what my own experience was.
Professor, let me put that question to you. What would you like this audience here in this room, as well as those who are watching on TV screens and on digital platforms, to take away from this book in terms of the big lessons that they could inculcate in their lives?
Yeah, a couple of things I would say. First thing is, being a professor of a business school for 35 years, I should say this. I think there is this widespread thinking that spirituality and business or spirituality and the other daily life doesn't go together. This book will falsify that. I think the greatest takeaway that we must seriously understand is a spiritually invested person will bring that courage to take decisions, will have that compassion to talk about inclusiveness, which Amitabhji was talking about. So I think the first important takeaway is it pays heavily to invest in spirituality. In fact, I teach a course on Bhagavad Gita for the last 15 years in IIM Bangalore. It's a huge take for this course. And I keep telling them that at this age, if you invest in spirituality, you have a great future ahead of you. Don't wait for 60 and 65 and say, let me start thinking about spiritual. I think that's the biggest takeaway from this. Because if you see, many of the attributes that Amitabhji talked about, they are all flowing from this. That sense of compassion, that axis of love, that is the bedrock of all these decisions. It doesn't happen like that. So I think I would say the single biggest takeaway is it pays eminently to invest in spirituality, and the only available scriptures in the world to have a good sense of spirituality is in India. I think that's the biggest takeaway.
That is the biggest takeaway for you, and perhaps that will be, as Dr. Balu pointed out, it's an interpretational work, so maybe that will be something that many will take away from the book. But I know we're out of time. Dr. Balu, I want to end by you, and I don't mean to steal your thunder for your 10th book, but do give us a sneak peek. You wanted to make a point,
I want to
Mr.
just
Piramal.
add to what Professor Mahadevan said. Please look at our scriptures. Look at the Gita. Who was it taught to? A young fellow in his 20s, the best archer in the world, in the midst of a battlefield. He was not 60 or 70 or something, he was young, probably under 30 if I'm not mistaken. So that's the lesson that has been taught. So what you said, it's applicable on day-to-day life. You look at Ramayana. Ram has come not as God, as a human being. And he suffers all this, and whatever his life story is not when he's 60 and all. He's probably in his 20s, would you say? So that's it. So it's for all of us at every age to learn. Just add to what you just...
add one more
yes,
sentence
please,
to it.
please. Mr. Kant is also waiting to jump in. Please go ahead.
Another beautiful thing that comes out of this book, since Ajayji talked about Ramayana, if you look at the Balakanda of Ramayana, there is a very strong message. The greatest elements of leadership starts by people knowing the Janapada. That's why Vishwamitra took both the kids, street by street and went all over and so on. That comes so beautifully in this book. That the greatest investment of leadership starts by connecting to the reality, not just sitting on an ivory tower. I mean, the resource may endow me to do all that, but I think the science of leadership lies there, and our scriptures show it so beautifully also. Sorry.
Mr. Kant.
So I think a lot of this is a remarkable book because the power within, to my mind, comes a lot from the Prime Minister's ability to be a great listener. I mean, when you are making a presentation, he just listens and absorbs. He doesn't speak. That's to my mind, is a great quality. Secondly, I've seen a lot of lousy presentations being made, but I have never seen him get angry. So, I mean, the spirituality comes out of the fact that the bureaucrats, the amount of garbage they dish to him, but I've never seen him get angry. Thirdly, I think Prime Minister, I have never seen him shying away from the fact, and I must be one of those who made a lot of presentations to him. So many times he's turned at me and told me at the end of the presentation कि तुमने जो बोला मुझे समझ में नहीं आया, फिर से समझाओ. I mean, a leader of that stature, the Prime Minister of the largest democracy, never shy of asking the basic questions and asking कि ये citizen को कैसे impact करेगा. So I think that is the power within this Prime Minister.
All good presentations, Mr. Kant, that you made? Well, Dr. Balu, as I said, I don't mean to steal your thunder. There is a 10th book somewhere, perhaps sooner than we think. But you started your speech by saying that it was a very interesting anecdote when you met the Prime Minister for the very first time. So I'm going to request you to give us a sneak peek into that before we close for the evening.
In the context of writing this book is the first visit. I'll talk about that. Leadership truly is driven by what Warren Bennis, the great leadership expert, talks about as a crucible moment. For every one of us, there is a crucible moment. We all experience crucible moments, but we don't reflect on it. It just passes. It becomes a memory. For a rare few, it stays on as a moment which is relived every day. And what happened to him, I don't think it's in the public domain. Possibly this book is the first time it's coming out publicly, and which is shared in the conversation. He was a young child, maybe 6, 7 years old, in a little village in Gujarat, and I think his underlying principle of communitization comes from those lived experiences. A couple who hadn't had a child for a long time, very longing for a child, and then they have a baby, and the whole community, the whole village celebrates it. And he was fascinated that why is one family's birth of a child in one family celebration for all of us? It doesn't stop there. A week later, the baby passes away. And the whole village goes into mourning. There's a collective grieving for the baby, but more importantly, a cow which was there in that house of that neighbor of Modi's stops eating. And this young child is not sure why, what is it doing? Why is it not eating? So he goes to his father and says, I don't understand. Why is this cow not eating? And his father says, I don't know, but possibly it's also grieving because it's part of the family. So it's grieving for the death in the family. A week later, the cow dies, because it's not eaten for a week. And at that was a crucible moment for him. And we all spoke about Seva and the 4S, and most of it comes from that, even the way I've analyzed it. He then tells himself, if an animal can feel so much for human beings, how much should a human being feel for another human being in distress? And his entire understanding of Seva comes, that's why he's able to see outside of himself. So leadership, the way I understood it, and from the scriptures, if I were to just put it in one sentence, it's about understanding oneself. So Adhyay, the Gita talks about. It doesn't stop there. It's also understanding others and the ability to see that there's no separation between you and the others. But in a Vyavaharic world, it's about the actions that bind the self to the others. And for him, the sentence that Swami Vivekananda popularized from the Vedas is Atmano Mokshartam Jagathitayacha. I need my salvation, I need my moksha, and I have to work towards it. But that cannot happen without Jagathita. I think that crucible moment sealed it for him, and that was something which was remarkable. And 50 years of his life is what I have researched. I have a huge material. There will be many more books. I don't know whether I'll have the energy to write them. But one thing I've seen steadily throughout is his expression of seva has expanded, but his definition has stayed the same. I should be useful to humanity outside of me. And that is the expression of power within.
Well, Dr. Balu, once again, congratulations on the book, and we look forward to many, many more. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Many thanks to the panel for being here this evening. May we all find the power within. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Before we get up, we'll just request Adil sir to kindly give little mementos to our panelists for all their time. I request the guests to wait for 2 minutes before departing, please. Yeah. I quickly want to call Alka ma'am, Member Admin, Capacity Building Commission, to deliver the thanking remarks for the day.
Very good evening. I have hurriedly written down what all I would like to share. So greetings to all and namaste. Thank you to everyone for being here with us, but I would like to focus on a few things, just like we have been talking. So first of all, I would like to say I'm privileged to have the last word for this evening. And it's a privilege more so because I'm going to be expressing gratitude, which is what comes from what all we have heard today. And that is, on this note, I would like to first of all thank the person whose power within we have been talking about this evening, who has become an era in himself for as far as this nation is concerned, I would say. His life journey and the anecdotes which have come across, which are there in the book, are something which each one of us could learn a little about from and could practice in the times to come as well. Special thanks to Mr. Ajay Piramal for expressing in such a humble way what all he derived from the book and from the person himself. And that is something which is very significant. And of course, Mr. Amitabh Kant, in his true style, the Sherpa style, I would say, has expressed such wonderful experience-based thoughts and with all of us, and made all of us laugh while listening to all those stories that he had to share. And Debjani Ghosh, in her wonderful style, has very softly and clearly expressed what going digital is all about, I would say. And of course, Professor Mahadevan, the way he shared with us straight from his heart is something which is very, very remarkable, and which has actually made us want to immediately pick up this book and read it. And what can be better than a Friday evening to talk about having some time to read over the next 2 days. So everyone is super excited about it, and that is what books like this are meant to be, that's what I would say. And of course, Mr. Bala Subramaniam, who's the person behind this book coming into being, is a person whose strengths, whose qualities Adil has already talked about. I won't repeat that, but yes, he is a person who's not only an intellectual, a leader, as he said, a book writer, a builder, and a humane person. he's also a person with a drive within, and which is because of which all this has happened. And today I would like to share with all of you is the day when our foundation day, I would say, for the CBC. We have completed 3 years. And I would like to clap for these stalwarts, right from Adil to Mr. Bala Subramaniam, the entire team led by Mr. Roy, our secretary to the commission, and of course Praveen Pradeshi, who was also part of this journey for the initial founding period. So on this note, while I would like to not take the names of all those very well-known personalities who are right in front of us, I would still like to take one name, and that would be of Dr. Bindu, who has traveled all the way from Mysore. The woman behind the success of this gentleman we have talked about today. So I would like to clap for her. I know they have been separated over last 3 years, but they have still been together, and that is the beauty of a relationship. And also, I will not want to miss out on acknowledging the contribution of not only the team CBC, I got the Karma Yogi team, but also the entire team which has worked, entire machinery, I would say, which has worked towards creating this movement of capacity building. And the person in the lead role, Adil, who's quietly sitting and pondering on what all has happened, is the person who has driven all of us to this day. So best wishes to everyone. Please enjoy reading this book, and best wishes to all those who are here with us on the dais. Thank you for coming all the way from different parts and being with us. Thank you all those who are present in front of me. It's been a wonderful evening, and we all leave enriched from this, the discussions. Thank you.
Before we wrap up, we thought we should wrap up with the national anthem. So can we quickly wrap up with the national anthem?
Janagana mana adhinayaka jaya he Bharata bhagya vidhata Punjab Sindhu Gujarat Maratha Dravida Utkala Vanga Vindhya Himachala Yamuna Ganga Uchala Jaladhi Taranga Tava Shubha Name Jage तव शुभ आशीष मागे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Thank you, everyone.